Hello and welcome to Six Figure Authors, the show that helps you take your writing career to the next level. I'm Lindsay Baroker and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Joe Lalo.
And I'm Andrea Pearson.
We've talked about productivity a bit before on the show, but it seems to be something that we all struggle with. So we're going to be sharing some of our top tips here today. In part because I don't think any of us has actually had a productive month. We've all had some life stuff going on here in September as we record this. So this is a little bit for you guys and maybe a little reminder for ourselves. Before we jump into that, do you guys have any news that you would like to share?
Sure. The time since our last recording has been almost completely filled with family health issues, which I won't go into here. If you follow me on social media, you know what it was. That started to cool down, and it's time to start digging myself out of the heap of displaced work and lost momentum. And the clutter behind me is going to, already famous on our show, is going to get much, much worse for the next couple episodes before it starts getting better, because I'm going to be sorting through a tremendous amount of stuff. I'm the only person who has the leeway to do so. So that's what my past and future looks like right now.
And I'm joining Joe in the clutter. We're in the middle of rearranging the office. And so for those on the YouTube, I'm hiding the mess with my body. So I've been sick this week. My brain's completely shot. So I haven't been productive. This episode is going to be really good for me.
All right, and for news for myself, I want to apologize in advance. Here you're going to notice some lag. I have just moved out after several years in the works of buying land and building a house kind of in the country outside of town here, and it's awesome, but I'm now on satellite internet, and it's kind of as awful as I was afraid it would be as far as having live chats because there's a lag. And I'm being told right now my internet connection is unstable. So hopefully in a couple of weeks, I will be able to find something that's going to work better. I'm going to get some cell phone booster stuff and maybe recording via Verizon instead of the satellite. So apologies again for the next couple of shows. It's going to be super laggy whenever it's my turn to talk, and I'm going to try to not talk over people. But anyway, as far as writing news goes, I released my final Star Kingdom novel, book 8 in the series, just 2 days ago as we record this. And the fans are saying they really liked it, that I wrapped up the series successfully. So I feel really good about that. I do feel as I was writing it that that it came together well. You don't always have that feeling. Sometimes you're kind of forcing things, and but yeah, I think this one did pretty good. And so, but I am now to the point where I don't have anything else in the hopper. I've kind of enjoyed this year being a little ahead of schedule most of the year, strangely enough, despite it being a really weird year. But this month has also been crazy for me between moving out to this new place and listing the old house and getting it ready to sell. Anybody who's moved, you know how fun that is. And also, we had the lovely forest fires in Oregon that were quite distracting for about a week. At least the smoke cleared up in Bend. For a while, we were like over 500 on air quality, and it was kind of like you walked out to your mailbox and you might get lost on the way back into the house if you didn't leave breadcrumbs, because it was just such a dense, it looked like fog, but was not fog. But like Andrea and Joe, I also am hoping to kind of get productive again coming up here in October. So I think we didn't have too much news there. So we will jump into some of our productivity tips that have worked for us over we're all about 10-year careers, many novels written. So the first thing that we wanted to jump into is kind of talking about the 80-20 rule and how it can apply to authors. I'm going to go ahead and read some of the snippets from Wikipedia because I know you guys all love it when I read stuff. I'm an excellent read alouder. But so the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle, states that for many events, roughly 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. Examples in computer science, the Pareto principle can be applied to optimization efforts. For example, Microsoft noted that by fixing the top 20% of the most reported bugs, 80% of the related errors and crashes in a given system would be eliminated, which is exactly what I would expect from Microsoft, given my experience with their operating systems in the past. Also, many video rental shops reported in 1988 that 80% of revenue came from 20% of the videotapes that they had in the store. So it's this weird rule that kind of pops up and is applicable. I wasn't even reading that in a lot of situations. And I've certainly found as an author, especially when it comes to the marketing stuff, that it absolutely has seemed to be that about 80% of my sales will come from 20% of my marketing efforts. So it's really helpful if you can really pay attention to what converts the best when you do marketing things, whether you're running advertising, whether you're working to build your newsletter. And the more you can use trackable links, or if it's appropriate, affiliate links, so you can actually see what you do that results in sales, the more dialed in with this stuff you can be. For example, I've found in the past, for a while it was kind of all the big thing to participate in, like Facebook launch parties. And I found that was like hours that you ended up sitting and answering questions on Facebook and dithering around, and very few sales, or so that's one of those. You've also heard as a writer the Wibble rule. Would I be better off writing, or would you be better off doing some other marketing that because you've been tracking stuff, that it actually works? And marketing aside, you may also find that something like 80% of your income comes from 20% of your titles. So that's, it's very common to see that new releases will bring in a lot of the income. I feel like I'm a little bit lucky in this, in that I have a pretty solid backlist, and quite a few people will find me through the new releases and then go check out the backlist. So in any given year, or the couple I've actually measured recently, it ends up being about 50% of my releases in the last year, or all of my releases in the last year accounted for about 50% of my income, and then the backlist accounts for about 50%. But I've certainly seen there'll be a couple titles where those are really doing well, or one series is really doing well, and then the other ones are bringing in a small amount of income. Hopefully the other ones at some point were front list and we're also bringing in more income, but I think that that's not everybody's experience. I think that it's very common to have like one series that really, for whatever reason, you nailed it, and that hit the tropes or whatever, it kind of just did well in the market. And then to have other series where you feel like you're pushing a boulder up a hill, even if it's in the same genre, and even if you feel like they're similar, it just ends up being that a lot of the effort that you put into one ends up being kind of, hopefully not wasted. Hopefully you still enjoyed writing the story. But if you want to do this for a living, I think it's another thing where it's just track things. And if it fits your muse and you're able to, I'm not saying you have to write to market, but in my case, if I have like 2 ideas I'm super excited about, now I've kind of trained myself, like, okay, like this year I was thinking, okay, next year I could do a space opera series. I have this idea for that, or I could do an epic fantasy series that I have an idea for. And I was like, well, in my history tells me that the epic fantasy is a better seller for me. I've just always made more on those series and those releases. So I'm going to do epic fantasy. So, just paying attention to what's working well, and then kind of try to backwards engineer that, like, what did I do right with that one? And if you haven't yet had a series hit like that, maybe just kind of skim through the top 100 lists in whatever subgenre you're looking for and see what's doing well. It's like, you not necessarily copy them, but maybe you'll realize, well, I don't have any of the elements that are in these books that are doing really well. So maybe that's why it's not catching on as much. But I like it personally best if you can kind of gather it from your own data, which is, of course, going to take numerous books out there, probably numerous series before you get more of an idea for that. All right, so I will now pass it on for Joe and Andrea to fill in their thoughts on kind of the 80-20 rule here.
Yeah, so 80-20 goes for just an awful lot of stuff. It goes for the effort you put into things, for sure. In general, the things that turn into actual money for you are writing and promotion. So if you're not spending most of your time on writing and promotion, then chances are you're putting a lot of, you're in the 80, not the 20 for most of the time. And I guess that's just how numbers work. But this is this is a situation where you should be analyzing the activities you're spending your time on. And if you are doing a lot of minor tasks that take a long time, and those tasks can either be delegated or streamlined with better software, this is a situation where you might think about putting some money in and making an investment so that you can loosen up divert some of your time over from the 80 to the 20, because I'll give you an example. It used to be formatting a book properly took me more than a day. It used to be it would take me a full day to get the file ready, and then another day to make the different versions of that file. And if that was still the case, that's way too much time for me to be spending on that. I've since gotten much better where I can get a paperback formatted in like less than 45 minutes. And even that is longer really than it should be, because if I just invested in a computer that could run Vellum and also invested in Vellum, it'd be like 3 clicks. But I'm comfortable with the amount of time that I'm spending on it. And I'm talking about software. If you are in a position where you can hire a virtual assistant, these are excellent jobs for VAs. It's just small. You don't even have to hand over too much information for them to be able to do it for you. So book formatting and stuff like that is a great thing to hand over. You're making virtually no money off of book formatting. It's just a formality before making the actual book available. Same goes for making graphics. I happen to enjoy tinkering away with graphics sometimes, but if you're doing a lot of ads or you're doing a lot of newsletters and Facebook and other social media posts that require graphics and they take you a long time, consider farming that out. There's tons of freelancers who absolutely charge pennies on the dollar to make stuff way better than the average person can. So graphics are a great thing to look at taking off of your plate so you can divert more effort to moneymakers. This also applies to individual elements of the writing process. If you find that 80% of a given writing session is spent backtracking or researching, consider doing more prep work. Do a better outline. We're going to talk a little bit of this later. Or develop a method to notate things that need to be addressed so that you can pick up that stuff later and do your research afterward or before, so you can stay in writing. And those are some ways that you can hopefully, make the 80-20 rule more of a 70-30 rule.
So, like what Joe was saying, graphics, like I love cover design. I used to do all my own covers and absolutely loved it. It wasn't until last year that I was like, you know what? My job is to be a writer, not to be a graphic designer. And so I've actually started handing that off to people. And for those who are listening, pre-made book covers, holy crap. I bought one this past week for $148 that when I first started writing would have probably been $700. It's phenomenal. Really, really awesome. So, I mean, there's so many opportunities now for those of us who enjoy doing things, but can't and don't have the time anymore. In the past, people would advise us to hand off like the 80%, like Joe was talking about getting an assistant. He's not telling you to hand off the 80% that never gets results to an assistant. He's telling you to hand off the stuff that actually gets results to an assistant. So your team should be all focused on that 20% that gets results, like the proven things, proven by you, things that move the needle. So if you have an assistant, don't hand them the Facebook events, don't have them do your, the things that only get you 2 downloads. And then another thing is, and sorry, I'm still not feeling good, so my brain is not totally there. Learn to say no. Anything that doesn't bring you joy and doesn't increase your productivity or move you towards your goal. So like, for example, I have goals in writing, but I also have goals to keep my kids alive till they reach adulthood. After that, it's on them. But anything that doesn't move you towards your goals, you should let go of, say no to, don't take on. And that's going to help you with maintaining that 20% productivity, because if you're taking on a whole bunch of side things that might be fun but don't really add value, then yeah, there you go.
Right, that's a good one. I've kind of ended up on a lot of not a lot, but some conferences, giving talks and being on panels, and I don't sell any nonfiction, so there's really no reason for my author career for me to do these things. I just say yes because I'm like, oh, well, we're kind of friends. We've met at other conferences, and so I finally this year, COVID's kind of helped because I realized how much I resented having to do these put together, because I'm not a perfectionist, but I want to not fall on my face also. So, put together a thoughtful presentation and then deliver. Like, it was kind of okay when I was getting to see friends at conferences and stuff, but I was like, I really resented it when I'm just stuck at home and I still have to do this because now the conference has gone online. So I'm like, nope, sorry, I'm not doing anymore. I mean, I don't know that I'll never do them again, But for the next year or so, I just saying no to that stuff. And it's hard. You don't want to disappoint people, you know, and you want to like be useful and helpful to the author community and give back if you can. But if it's something that ends up taking a lot of, not just time to do, but then headspace, like you're for 2 weeks ahead of it, you're like, I got to do that thing. I got to put together that presentation. And you know, it makes a lot of sense for the people who have books to sell related to the things they talk about at conferences or have courses or services. But if you're purely a fiction author, you know, it's not like maybe, you know, maybe a few people will go check out your $3.99 ebooks, but it's not really the same as that being part of your funnel to get people to buy your stuff. So learning to say no is hard, but I agree that it's a good thing. And I'm a little bit distracted too. I'm not sick, but I have a dog that had surgery just a few days ago, knee surgery. So she's behind me laying in a dog bed with a big funnel on her head. And I've locked the other dogs out of the room so there won't be any trauma because I have 3 dogs. And sometimes there's like, even though there's like 8 dog beds around the house, they all want to be in the same dog bed at the same time. So anyway, I've got clacking toenails outside the office door. So this is a great episode, guys. Hopefully you will still get something out of it. So let's move on to our next productivity tip, which is to define goals and track your progress. We've all heard the saying that what gets measured gets done, and regular measurement and reporting can keep you focused, and you can also use that information to make decisions and improve your results. As an example, we've talked about this before. Rachel Aaron's book, 2K to 10K, mentioned this. She's kind of got 3 big points. You definitely check out that book if you haven't yet. But one of the things she recommends is sort of trying out writing at different times in the day, insofar as you can around your work schedule and family. Because you may find out, you know, like you think you're not a morning person, which is me completely. I don't feel like I'm at all perky and with it in the morning. But I have kind of measured like how many words per hour do I write at these different times of day, like, you know, morning, afternoon, late at night. And I just find that if I can get a couple thousand words done in the morning before I start doing much of anything else, before I take the dogs out for a walk or whatever, that I'm like, wow, I can actually get them done really quickly, even though I'm not a morning person. I'm like chugging my latte at the same time there. So it may be worth for you just kind of doing that for a couple of weeks, measuring your output. And, you know, I always, like, I'm a person that loves word count. Not everybody does, but so I always figure out, and like I have Scrivener, I always put in a manuscript goal and session targets in Scrivener. I know there are people who don't like to worry about word counts because they feel it's stressful, or they just feel they're writing junk words or something, and they just want to write for X amount of time. And maybe that works for them, but I think they may be the exception rather than the rule. I know I get super focused when I want to have X words done and to hit my daily goal and time is running out. I'm actually more productive when like I have an appointment or something, or I agree to meet friends for dinner. I'm like, oh shoot, I actually have to finish my words by X time in the day. And you know, that's just, you'll have to find out what works for you. But I think that the biggest eye-opening thing for me was finding out which times a day I'm actually more productive, because it wasn't what I thought it would be. Mornings, like I said, they're awful, but apparently I'm really can just get the words out in the morning. So do you guys have any thoughts on defining goals and tracking progress?
Yes, indeed. I found that one of the things that really motivates me is the concept of streaks. A while back, I started using a thing called Habitica, which we can talk about later. But it lets you pick daily tasks and habits and keeps track of how many times in a row you've hit your goal. So if my goal is to write 3,000 words, and I've done so for the last 15 work days, and today I've got 500 words left and I'm just not feeling it, the thought, like, I know that I hit it the last 15 times, I want to make it 16. So like keeping track and sort of holding myself accountable for the purposes of streaks have been really motivational. Also, things start to feel helpless sometimes. Sometimes we're just not, sometimes we're just not going to be very productive. Life gets in the way. And if things start to feel like I'm just being pathologically a failure at hitting my counts, I find it's often useful to break larger tasks down to an equivalent pile of smaller tasks. So again, if I'm shooting for 3,000 words a day, maybe I'll make it, I'm shooting for 1,000 words a day 3 times. And it's exactly the same number of words, but you have these little landmarks where you can knock it off. And you feel, instead of like having this gigantic insurmountable heap in front of you, you've got 3 nice little steps, and you can like, you get that little, you know, dopamine rush when you get to cross one off, and it moves you on to the next one. So keeping track in the way that you've, you know, it is occasionally useful to decrease your goals, but that's a last resort for me. I usually try to improve just the feeling of accomplishment by making the goals smaller and more granular. And yeah, like we talk about a lot, but just having to-do lists, just knowing how much you got done in a given day, because if you aren't codifying what you're actually doing in a given day, you might miss a lot of the productivity you've actually been having because you just sort of weren't keeping track. Like when you have a to-do list, you see, well, you know, I got all these chores done, I got these words done, I got that formatting done, I talked to these 3 people on, like, you could have a full day, but if you're only counting the words, or you're only counting whatever, the release of the book, it can feel like you're falling behind. So it's not, keeping track isn't just about becoming more productive, but about realizing how productive you currently are.
And if you're feeling down about your progress, sometimes using motivational quotes or affirmations can help you get back in the groove. And I remember when I first heard about affirmations, I was like, what, the voodooism? It's like, what are we even talking about here? But it really helped me. So some of the most productive times have been when I've flipped through a stack of index cards, which I don't have right next to me. I have these, but anyway, and they'll have like motivational quotes on them or affirmations written on them, and I'll go through them once a day or anytime I'm discouraged or whatever. And that's been really helpful. And by affirmations, I mean things that, you know, I'm trying to think of something, you know, like I can write or meet my daily goal. I can keep the kids alive. I can be successful, even with 3 kids that I homeschool, things like that. Just kind of the sorts of things that you want to be true, that you know are true, but some days you just don't feel it. And another thing you can do to get back on track is to read from a previous book you've written. So like, you know, read a favorite scene, something that has motivated you or that you were, you know, you did well, and that gets you excited about being a writer again. That helps get the juices flowing. And that's all for me for now.
I should add to what Joe said, that's exactly what I do with, like, even if it's a day where all I have to do is write and my goal is to get 10,000 words, which I have not done for quite a while. I was really rocking it at the beginning of the summer, but yeah, we'll be falling off there. But it's like 2,000, and then I take a break and do stuff. Then I come back and try to do another 2,000 and take a break. And usually as the day gets longer, I can do less, like then it goes down to 1,500 and then 1,000, or whatever. So that can help, you know. And I don't know if you need to reward yourself. Some people like to reward yourself, but I do find it, you know, just taking that break, going and doing the dishes or whatever, not exactly rewarding. Although if you're procrastinating from your writing, somehow even the dishes can be appealing. Anything that's better than the thing you're struggling with at the time. But I usually find that that's healthy also, of course, to take breaks. So, okay, next not motivational tip. Andrea got me thinking of motivational cards and tips. Next productivity tip. And I think this will help if you're somebody that doesn't like word count goals because you feel like you're reading junk or you're writing junk and just filling the words, you know, they're fluff and they're not really what you want to be writing. I think this will be helpful. And this is outline is going to be my first tip, or, you know, and if you're a diehard not an outliner, at least scribble down notes about tomorrow's writing ahead of time. And the whole idea here is basically so that when you do sit down to write, you're trying to get your 3,000 words or whatever, you already know exactly what's going to happen in the scenes because you figured it out the night before while you were walking the dog, or you were in the shower or driving. I don't know, those are all the good times for me for thinking of things. And then you just, you know, if I'm going to try to do 10,000 words, I got to do that the night before. It's usually about 3 scenes for me. Don't write the shortest scenes. So I just got to kind of figure it out, what happens in each scene. I put little notes in my phone app. And then when I sit down to write, it just flows out. And, you know, this last book I've been working on in September, which we've already talked about now for all, but September is just not a great month for writing. But I didn't really have a good outline. Like I outlined, but I veered off of it right away, and I didn't go back and sort of redo it. And it was really, it's, you know, a short novel. It's going to be one of my urban fantasies. It's only about 90,000 words. And I compare that to the sci-fi I was working on earlier in the summer that ended up at like 154,000 words with all these point of views. But because I knew that had to be outlined pretty well to keep everything straight, I had like like I said, 7 point of view characters that had to all wrap everything up, and the stories had to be intertwined. I knew I couldn't screw around and not have a good outline. And sometimes I'm making it harder on myself by not having a great one for this one and having other things going on. But so take home for me is just figure out ahead of time what you're going to write. If you just sit down and you don't know, yeah, that's fun, you're going to write junk, and you're going to end up deleting those scenes because later you're like, oh yeah, the plot actually needs to do this other thing. And so then you just wasted your time. So even if you're not an outliner, I highly recommend take a few notes about the couple of scenes you have coming up, and I think you'll find it a lot easier when you sit down to write. Passing it off to you guys.
I definitely am a strong proponent. I mean, obviously outlining, but just taking the little notes, and it works in even smaller chunks too. Like I like to surround notes. Like my technique for note taking is I take 3 asterisks and I sort of bracket a note with those so that I can find them, because I never use 3 asterisks for anything but notes. So I can find them super easy. And if I'm interrupted, I will jot down a quick note about what I had in mind for the next couple sentences. And it seems like an absurd thing to do, except there's my nephew lives in the house with me, and I am interrupted rather frequently. Plus, my chosen method for a lot of the time is the Pomodoro technique. So you're going to end up, your time runs out. It's time to go take a break. Usually I break the rules and finish a thought, but if I decide that I'm going to be a stickler, I leave a note. So if you've got a couple of dozen interruptions a day, and every time you're interrupted, you have to go back and read the last 2 paragraphs to see what you're up to so that you can continue. That's a lot of time in a given day, and therefore a tremendous amount of time over the course of a novel. So it's a sort of thing that you that you really need to start, I really need to start keeping notes of just what my next few thoughts are. Similarly for the end of the day. Like I don't have extremely detailed outlines all the time. So occasionally I'll have 1 paragraph that describes 30,000 words of a novel. So I can't just, wake up the next day and say, okay, what's the next scene I'm writing in this if it's not detailed enough. So before I go to bed, I'll make a note of where I was headed so that the next day I can start off quickly without having to find my context. And this is a very important thing, by the way, I found before I started taking these notes. If I was trying to save time and just not go back and reestablish my context, more often than not, I would either reuse lines or redo entire scenes because I forgot that I had done them already. And it's one thing to write a scene that you decide afterward isn't necessary for the novel. It's another thing to write a scene that you believed to be necessary, but you had already written, because you can absolutely never use the same scene twice. It's not even like I can pull that off and put it in a file somewhere and use it later. It was just, duplication of work. So you don't want to duplicate work. It is the opposite of productivity. So if you find yourself repeating yourself or reestablishing context way too often, just tiny little notes, either in the note itself or on a pad next to you. I loaned somebody my pad, or I'd hold it up and you'd see where it has a note on the last short story I was writing. But yeah, super duper useful to keep notes.
So what you could do is download Joe's books, rewrite them, and then publish them on the sly. Right, Joe?
Sure. I mean, it worked for one guy.
Didn't work that well. He only had 7 reviews.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump on the bandwagon of saying knowing the night before what you're going to be doing the next day is huge. And also the day of, and this is just kind of random, but this really helps me. Like I get up, and on my days when I'm most productive, I make my bed, I change my clothes. Like I don't stay in my pajamas all day, which I don't do a lot, but I change first thing in the morning instead of waiting until, my toddler goes down for a nap. I'll shower, just make myself look like I'm going somewhere, because doing that, the way you dress, it affects you emotionally, mentally, and affects how your brain functions. Some days it's not possible, honestly, like especially this week. This week's been really rough for me, but being ready for the day physically does help you be ready emotionally and mentally. And then again, like Joe was mentioning earlier, to-do lists. What I do with mine is I give them 3 categories, like really important, middle, need to be done, but not really, really soon. And then not important at all, but still need to be done. And then, you know, just keeping track of things that way. And then, and that endorphin rush when you mark something off, it's really helpful.
You guys get a lot more out of marking things off on your to-do list than I do. I'm like missing that endorphin thing. I don't know. All right. So another productivity tip is just to use deadlines. And we've talked about this before, but having a deadline, ideally with someone waiting for something from you, can help us procrastinators out there finish. I schedule dates with my editor. This actually came about just because she got busy, and I was like, well, can you just mark me out a spot every month and I'll try to have something for you? And that ended up with me always having a deadline. Like I know all year when I have to get stuff in basically at the beginning of the year. And the pressure of not wanting to disappoint somebody else, you know, I would hate to say, sorry, I just don't have anything. Like she's a full-time editor and I know she depends on her clients for, that's how she makes a living. So I don't want to just shaft her at the last minute and be like, I don't think I'm gonna get that to you. I mean, every now and then, you know, like once a year, maybe something's gonna come up and you're not gonna make it. But I think you know, the pressure of knowing you want to be a good client for other people, just like you hope that they will be good at getting, you know, your cover art or your edits and stuff back to you in a timely manner. I find that that's really helpful in meeting deadlines or in accomplishing, finishing manuscripts and getting books out there. If you're not at that schedule yet, or you're not at that point yet with your writing that you're scheduling editors, another thing you can do kind of along the same lines is to have an accountability partner. It can just be another writer. You don't have to be in the same country, the same state, but somebody you check in with regularly and just say like, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And they'll do the same thing for you. And it's just a lot harder to blow things off once you've told other people that you're going to do them. That's sort of like whenever you're trying to lose weight, they recommend, you know, join a group with other people that are trying to do the same thing, because it's just, you don't want to disappoint other people. It's like this social thing. We're social creatures, and it's, you know, kind of embedded in us to not want to do things that are going to get us ostracized from the, what are we a herd? Are we a pack? What are simians, whatever we are? Probably, we'll just say the pack. Somebody in Facebook can give me the proper word later. But so it's, you know, I used to be somebody that was very poo-poo and, you know, accountability partner. That sounds so cheesy, but it's like, it works. I know that I first started finishing novels, and I've talked about before how the first one took 7 years before I actually finished it. And I was horrible about starting things, like getting really excited, doing the first 30,000 words, and then getting kind of stuck. And it just was easier at that point to stop and start something else. So like many writers, I mean, I think I still have a lot of those stories. They're probably in Lotus or some operating, you know, system I don't have anymore, so I can open them. But I had a lot of half-finished, you know, manuscripts because I didn't finish them. But once I joined a writing workshop, it was a sci-fi and fantasy online writing workshop. They still exist if you want to check them out. I think it's like $75 a year or something. But I started posting chapters, because that's how you do. You like, first you critique somebody else's stuff, and then you can post a chapter or a short story. And just the process of putting chapters up regularly, and then, you know, kind of getting to become friends with the people who would critique them, and you would critique theirs, and you would see that they put up new chapters and they're making progress, and they would kind of nudge you like, hey, are you gonna get a new chapter up? I want to know what happens next in the story. That was very helpful for me in finally finishing a couple of novels. So whatever you can do, accountability partner, date with your editor, you know, date with somebody, you know, I think that just that little bit, you know, you don't want somebody that's going to like guilt you if you don't want to get it done, but just a little bit of social pressure, I think, can really help those of us. Because I am totally a procrastinator, guys. I don't want you to think that I am not. All through school, I was the person that did the assignments the night. We knew 2 weeks ago that what the assignment was, and I was the night before up until whatever, 1 in the morning, you know, back when I was supposed to be in bed at 10 or whatever, finishing stuff. So I am that person. Okay, you guys want to chime in on that?
Sure. I ended up I have not traditionally had very hard deadlines in my process, but this year I had a bunch of them. And they came in two different forms. At the beginning of the year, I announced what my 3-book releases were going to be. I said it was going to be the year of 6. I was going to put out the book 6 in my 3 main series. So right at the beginning of the year, I committed myself to getting 3 books out in a year. Like, so that's the accountability thing. Now all of my fans know that I had said it was going to happen. And even though they're not going to, rake me over the coals for failing, it is still, it's out there, and I have to rise to that level. Also, when I announced that, my editor said to me, "Hey, I'm getting pretty busy. If you actually want to get all 3 of these books edited by me this year, then you're going to have to get 3 slots." So I knew at the beginning of the year what all 3 slots, my editing slots were going to be. So I had to meet those goals. And this is extremely motivating, not only in that I redouble my efforts to make sure I don't disappoint someone else way more likely than when I'm trying to actually just satisfy myself. It made my year a lot more predictable and better paced. And also, when you start button up against a deadline, it really starts to highlight the parts of your process that take too long. And like, there's nothing like a blind panic to make you realize that you've been wasting time on this or that, and make a note of that and don't do that next time. And it sort of, like, when you start to see it reveals bottlenecks and stuff and helps you improve your process. So I mean, don't set a deadline that's like unachievable. Don't try to trick yourself into getting a book done in half a time by setting a deadline that's way too soon. But if you find that you're having a hard time with deadlines, it's a really good way to analyze your process and see where you can improve it.
I love that. I'm like, I've been screwing off way more than I thought I was. So, and this is my point I wanted to add here, was that it's important for us to recognize that giving our all, I mean, it's going to be different every single day. So like right now, my all is probably 20% of when I'm feeling well, my alls when I'm my grammar. I think you guys understand though. We're human. We can't possibly put in 100% every single day. And some days 100% is going to be another day's 50% or another day's 20% or, but I mean, every day is going to be different. You just got to give yourself grace and not beat yourself up too much if you are, not feeling well, or if you are struggling from lack of sleep, things like that. Just recognize that, I mean, we're not trying to say, if you're not productive, then you suck. I mean, every day is going to be different.
All right, and we're just going to finish up with some bonus tips that we each have, and not necessarily have a big conversation around them all, but my one is not necessarily writing specific, but if you can try to find someone else to gather and sort information like news and things out there, like the publishing industry, what's going on in the publishing industry, whatever else you follow, real estate, stock information, all these things are things that you can spend hours a day watching the news. And like, not only do you get overwhelmed and like, I don't know, just start like obsessing about stuff, but it's a huge waste of time. Like, you may legitimately be trying to gather information because you have to make decisions related to this, like publishing, should I go wide? Should I go exclusive to Amazon? What's working best for people right now? You can sit there and spend hours, scrolling through Facebook posts and groups and trying to figure out like who's doing what and what's working, and then all the marketing. But just find a couple people that are doing what you want to do, that they're kind of collating the news. Like, I've mentioned before, I listen to Joanna Penn's podcast most weeks because she does news stuff at the beginning. And also Jane Friedman has a publishing newsletter called The Hot Sheet. You have to pay for it, but it's not a lot. It's like $50 a year or something. So you can just get those things, and then you don't have to spend hours in Facebook groups trying to figure out stuff. And find whatever the areas in your life that you're trying to make decisions, like big important decisions, investments, financial stuff, whatever. Just kind of find those people that live and breathe that industry already. Just follow them. Like I've mentioned before, I'm not a huge stock market person, but I've got one lady, Kathy Wood. She's awesome. She runs like a growth ETF, and she emails every day. These are the stocks we sold, bought and sold today for our fund. And once a month they do an update on the economy and stuff. So I just pay attention to what she's talking about, and I get the gist. You know, somebody that's got 40 years of experience and lives and breathes that stuff, so I don't have to pay attention to it all the time. So hopefully find those people. Hopefully we are somewhat helpful. This last couple months, I haven't been paying much attention to Facebook groups and what's going on in the publishing world, but well, hopefully things will settle back down this fall. And yeah, I'll pass it over to you guys for some more bonus tips.
I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to mention it in more detail now. Software can really help with productivity. If you're not using software to track really everything, you should be, because software is a lot better for keeping track of things than a growing pile of notes, which is what I used to do. So I mentioned Habitica. Habitica is a free website. You can pay for it, but currently I'm still using the free version, and it does everything that I need. Ostensibly, it is for gamifying productivity, but if I'm honest, I have primarily been using it for the utility. It lets you set up daily tasks, what they call good habits, and also just to-do list items. And good habits are things you can do multiple times a day or 0 times a day. Daily tasks are things that you absolutely have to get done every day or every week or every month. You can configure that with and then they automatically re-add themselves to the list the following day or week or month. And then the to-do list items are one-time things that you only have to do then. And it really helps you, this is the thing that was keeping track of streaks that I mentioned earlier. And it tells, it for a while saves the list of things that you got done if you need to look and see how well you've actually been doing. It syncs with your phone and then all sorts of good stuff like that. And yes, technically, when you check off items, it makes a little ding noise and gives you gold and gives you dragon eggs and hatching potions. And then you can feed your cotton candy dragon fish until it is large enough to put a saddle on. And that's great. But honestly, just having the list that refreshes itself is already been making a big impact. So I recommend Habitica. I think it's really very useful.
And I wasn't aware that Habitica was also a website. So I've been using it. Joe recommended it. I don't know, it's been like a month and a half, and I really like the phone app, but I'm going to have to check out the website too then. And like Joe, I don't use the gamification side of it. I've probably got a whole bunch of little eggs that'll grow into all sorts of little creatures, but it is super well organized. It makes it really, really great to keep up with things. So my tips here, and I've got a bunch. I'm just going to kind of go through them quickly. Keep note-taking things on hand. I think we might have mentioned that already, or maybe I'm just remembering me writing that down. I don't know. Recognize that motivation is personal. So what works for you won't necessarily work for others, and vice versa. Don't beat yourself up if, going for a walk doesn't help you be productive. Reward yourself during the work. So if, like a latte or a smoothie or eating ice cream or chewing on a piece of gum or going on a road trip, a lot of rewards won't work for this, but still don't put rewards so far off that they'll never come. So just consider doing things while you're working that you enjoy doing. A lot of the time that does equate with food. I don't recommend eating too much food while you're writing, because if you're writing as much as you want to be, that's going to be a lot of, well, I've experienced the pound gainage. So exercise, movement equals productivity. Even if it's just a short walk, getting your blood moving will help get the words flowing. And especially, even if it's just a hard 5 to 10 minute workout or something like that, sort of stuff really, really wakes up the brain. And Lindsay's got some lag, but I know Lindsay works out quite regularly, and she's probably the most productive of the three of us. She's showing us her muscles. So don't diss the physical aspect of writing. Your brain needs that motivation, that movement to keep working. And then so along that line, use a treadmill desk. There's some really awesome ones available. You can make a treadmill desk off of a used treadmill that you get off of like the classifieds or Craigslist or something. Drink lots of water before writing. It helps your brain focus. Again, your brain is surrounded by fluid, and if you are dehydrated, it makes it harder for your brain to actually function, and it can lead to headaches and like that brain fog and tiredness. Chew your gums, chew gum. And my favorite's like Trident. I've got actually right here this bag of Trident gum, and I just will grab a different flavor anytime I need something. And I also keep like mints on hand. Switch things up. So try working at different times of the day. Like Lindsay said, you don't know at noon if you'd be a better writer at 3 if you've never written at 3. work in a different location, rearrange things in your office, change the music you listen to, get a different flavor of gum. And then this one's really big, especially with kids. Before I start writing, I make sure I've taken care of everything that might come up when I start writing. Like I use the bathroom, I get a drink of water, I eat, I blow my nose, I feed the kids, whatever I need to do so that I don't have any distractions once I start writing. And then this is also something that works really well for people who have a lot on their plate, like kids and other people's schedules that you're trying to keep up with. I go by weeks, not days, and I'll like set up my goals for that week, like the things I want to accomplish during the week, so that on individual days, if everything falls apart, it doesn't matter. And then I keep them on, not anymore because my office is taken apart, but I have them usually on that wall right there. And it's big and it's bold letters and bold colors, and it helps me recognize how I'm doing on my goals. The end.
Awesome. And it's great that you mentioned exercise, because I actually, like many people probably since COVID times have started, just basically said goodbye to the gym membership. Like that's kind of the last place you want to be with all the heavy breathing and stuff and the machines right next to each other. So I've been kind of gradually building up my home gym, which is mostly just some barbells. I finally got a treadmill and an elliptical, and I was like, they're like my toys. I was super stoked. I actually use that stuff. So, but the point was that not only does it kind of get you moving, but speaking of endorphin hits, which I do not get from checking things off on a to-do list, if I go up and, you know, jog for 20 minutes or do the elliptical for 20 minutes, enough to kind of break a sweat and get a little heavy breathing going on, which who doesn't enjoy heavy breathing? That's an endorphin thing. Like it really does boost my mood. Like a lot of times when I'm just completely not into things, like I'm just like, oh man, I don't feel like writing, I don't feel like doing anything, I'm not really feeling that great. If I can make myself go do some exercise, almost always that's a real mood booster, and it's a little easier. So you may consider doing that, breaking up breaking up your day with something like that. All right, do you guys have anything? I got my dog in the cone wandering around. Since it's the end of the show, I'll show her off. There she is, looking pitiful with her leg. You can't see it. It's her back knee. It's all shaved and stitched up. She has like, it's sort of the equivalent of a human ACL. And we tried like platelet-rich injections. Now she's right here. There's a mouth. And they didn't work that well, so she's had knee surgery now. And gosh, I got about 12 weeks of not doing too much and doing some doggy therapy with her. And she's only 2, so she has insane energy. Like right now, she's sedated. Like I have sedative for the first 2 weeks, but it only kind of takes the edge off. She's a crazy girl. So thank you very much for listening, everyone. Do you guys have any final stuff to add before we wrap up?
Nope, I think
Nope.
I think I hit all my points.
All right, well, hopefully something was helpful, you guys. Thanks for the patience with the internet lag. I will hopefully get something figured out in a couple of weeks. It is the curse and the joy of being rural now, which is you know, no more broadband. But anyway, thank you for listening, everyone. And thank you to Joshua Pearson for producing the show. You can find the show notes or leave a comment or question at sixfigureauthors.com with the number 6. And I've been a little sparse on the Facebook group, but hopefully in October things are going to be settling back down. So we're also at Six Figure Authors Facebook group. You can ask questions there too. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye-bye.
See you later.
So long, everybody.